Hello all, I trust you're all having a happy festive season, whatever you celebrate as we end 2016 going into 2017. I want to draw your attention to how we can actually take back the ancient past from official history, and that's by using tools that they've used against us since forever, weaponized language, and also to change something, to give things names and terms before they get to give them names and terms. So therefore, the actual spellcraft of the terminology and the word is co-opted by us rather than it being posed upon us with a specific meaning. So for instance, instead of calling them cairns, they call them tombs. Instead of calling them court cairns, we could call them what they were originally called, horn cairns. Now, this new channel is all about the occult, and the occult and magic are very much rooted in the idea of using linguistics and using words. Since I came onto this scene, right back to the beginning, I've been talking about breaking the Babylon mind. The Babylon mind is about the use of language to impose a specific identity regarding an object, person, idea or place or historical idea upon us, so we only accept it one particular way. This is why, even though no bodies were found in the Great Pyramid at Giza, it's a tomb, because why mainstream science, mainstream archaeology tells people it's a tomb. This is the same reason when Nout in Ireland was opened up in the 1950s, they found no bones inside it but declared it a tomb to the equinox. It's just silliness. Now, okay, we're going to do an exercise here. We're going to actually name something. Well, I'll name it. And I hope you will actually use this term yourself and put it out there as this archaeological wonder is unfolding and manifesting before our eyes into the real world. We all know about what's happening at Orkney. It very much ties in with what I talk about in my book, The Druid Code. Now, there's a documentary link below from a few years ago, a Neil Oliver BBC programme, and it's a pretty good one. I quite like Neil Oliver. As BBC mainstream people goes, he does his best to drop sort of truth bombs into documentaries and, you know, this kind of thing, to try and sneak it out there a little bit. And so he's not a bad guy that way, and I quite like his presentation style. But of course, because he works for the BBC, there are limitations that he has to work within the sort of academic framework that governs the BBC's thinking when it comes to anything to do with history, archaeology, mythology and so on, especially anything scientific. Now, I'm sure many were paying attention to the remarkable Neolithic discoveries taking place, the Ring of Brodgar, in Orkney, and what's happening up there is quite remarkable. Now, in this documentary below, they clearly show a pyramid. It's not anything else, it's a pyramid. A giant pyramid has been discovered from the Neolithic in Orkney. They do everything but use the P word. Why? Because it would distract and make people think away from pyramids in Egypt. Remember, we don't even hear much about the pyramids in Central America or China. The mainstream plays these down terribly. You really think about it, the only pyramids we really hear about are still the ones in Egypt. Why? They tie in with the out of Babylon idea, the Bible, the whole idea that Western timeline is built upon. That's where civilization began. We were all monkeys and savages, and it wasn't until Christianity, well, the Romans first, then Christianity came along, that we stopped being monkeys and savages. Even though they dig up a pyramid on top of a phenomenal complex in Orkney, we're still savages. It's still a death cult. So they haven't really named this pyramid at Orkney yet. They tried to make out that, now there's ridiculous things mentioned in this documentary towards the end. The chief archaeologist claims that the people who lived there symbolically destroyed the site and then filled it in with shell middens. This is all the signs of the tsunami. The tsunami that I believed wrecked Europe 2500 BC, Western Europe anyway, and led to the end of the Neolithic stone building megalithic cultures, and then the culture that came later, which is what my book The Druid Code really is about. And it was preserved in mythology and so on. And this is why there's large, even here in Sligo at Carramore, there's large shell middens on top of the mountains, for God's sake. They weren't put there by man. Now, the pyramid doesn't have a name other than it's called Complex 10, temple 10, or tomb 10, number 10. And so I would suggest, and they show the graphic, you'll see it yourself, it's the profile pic for this video, and you'll also see it in the video link below of the BBC documentary, to make it look as cold and grey and sterile as possible, even though they've now found plenty of evidence that Neolithic people were using paints and pigments to actually paint up and make the Neolithic structures look as beautiful as possible. They still show cold, dark, grey, sterile buildings, right? They try to keep them as simple as possible, even though the footprints are incredibly complex. They put roofs on them that still look like mud huts, because they're still caught up in the idea of the savage. That's a pyramid at the end, and I believe they did not demolish the previous structures. What they did was they probably built the pyramid on top of that, and had this remarkable multi-layered engineering that you see very commonly also used in Sumeria. They can't show this, they can't talk about this, because this destroys their out of Babylon timeline. Now let's picture this pyramid in Orkney, okay? Neolithic era, 5,000 years ago. It's not a sterile box. It has two standing stone menhirs in the front. Imagine at night time, the pyramid in Orkney, the sea around it, right? The two standing stone menhirs on either side, perhaps with torches burning on the top of them, right? Ceremonial fires. Underneath the northern lights. When do you ever see the northern lights in mainstream archaeology associated with Neolithic sites? It's only till recent years that amateur folks, photographers and megalithic researchers, amateurs again, people like us who are driven by passion, that we go up there and go to these places with our good quality Nikon, Canon and other digital cameras, and we take beautiful photographs of the northern lights. All the decades and centuries that mainstream archaeologists have known about this, they never once associated the northern lights with the Neolithic structures of northern Britain, particularly Orkney, Lewis and so on in Scotland, Aberdeenshire. So let's put our own spellcraft on this one, okay? I'm going to suggest from now on, in order to romanticize, charge and weaponize back at them the kind of spellcraft they use on us, that we refer to the pyramid at Orkney as the Pyramid of the Northern Lights. The Pyramid of the Northern Lights. Let that sink into your head. Let that beautiful vista, that idea of a pyramid with the northern lights dancing above it, let that sink into your head. The ceremonial fires on the two menhirs, probably decoratively painted. Let that sink into your head. Put the idea out there. Stop calling it Tomb 10 or Temple 10. Start calling it the Pyramid of the Northern Lights. Now, this new channel I have, Open Source Occult TV, doesn't necessarily deal with megaliths, but it deals with the idea of magic, and in particular European folk magic, which is based on Druidism. Actually, all magic more or less is when you start looking at it. And other earlier priest and shamanic ideas within Northern Europe. That's my book, The Druid Code, deals heavily with. If you're interested in this kind of idea, please subscribe to this channel. So it's a new channel. I'm trying to put good content on it. I'm going to make documentaries and stuff. It will occasionally deal with megaliths and megalithic structures, but in terms of these ideas, of these magical ideas, more so than archaeological, or even things like archaeoastronomy. These are and even rock art. These will be dealt in other forms by other people better than myself. But however, I do have a good knowledge of magic, I do have a good knowledge of the occult, and I think we can actually win this war by changing the language ourselves. So remember that one. It's not Tomb 10 at Orkney, it's the Pyramid of the Northern Lights. Thank you very much. Please subscribe and continue to enjoy your wonderful holiday season. Thank you. Bye.